Imagine for a moment that everything you've believed about sleep is wrong. Imagine that tonight, when you close your eyes, you're not just a body surrendering to rest, but a traveler crossing invisible boundaries. If this is true, you're not just falling asleep, you're opening a door. And here comes the first shock. What if this door didn't lead to oblivion, but to another level of reality? Nikola Tesla deeply believed that nothing in the universe was simply rest. For him, sleep wasn't emptiness, it was vibration. It wasn't pause, it was attunement. And this insight transforms each night into a mystery far greater than any waking day could offer. How many times have you woken up feeling like the dream you lived was more real than your own routine? Perhaps a detail of a street you've never visited, the look in the eyes of someone who's already departed, or an emotion so intense it still pulses even after you open your eyes. Traditional science would call this neural activity, a play of synapses replaying disconnected memories. But Tesla refused to accept explanations that reduced the human mind to an isolated machine. He saw the brain as an antenna, and each dream as a captured frequency. The real enigma, therefore, is not what the dream shows, but what it translates. Closing your eyes is like turning off a radio station to find another. The question is, are you consciously adjusting the dial, or are you leaving it to chance? For Tesla, this chance was dangerous. He believed that night revealed not only inner depth, but also invisible fields that permeate us and connect us to the cosmos. While everyone else sought rest, he sought clarity. While everyone else surrendered to the escape of consciousness, he immersed himself in its expansion. This stance raises an inevitable question. What if we are wasting one of the greatest instruments of human existence simply because we believe sleep is merely rest? Discomfort grows when we consider the implications. If sleep is a portal, what happens to us when we cross it without realizing it? Are we living parallel lives in invisible layers? Would we be able to reconnect with those who have passed away, access memories we never experienced, or feel emotions that don't belong to this life? Tesla intuited that we could. He said that everything was energy, frequency, and vibration. If all of reality vibrates, dreams cannot be just invention, they are capture. They are attunement to waves that already exist, just waiting for someone to adjust to them. Now, imagine the anguish of realizing that every night you connect to invisible worlds, but upon waking, you've forgotten almost everything. Isn't it frustrating to think that life dedicates a third of its existence to sleep, and yet we treat this time as a waste? Tesla didn't see it as a break. He saw it as a laboratory. For him, each night was a scientific, spiritual, and vibrational experiment. It was as if the deepest secrets of the universe were whispered in his ear while the world slept. The question that arises is inevitable. Why don't we learn to listen too? An internal conflict emerges at this point. Accepting that dreams may be mere illusions comforts, but also limits. Accepting that they may be portals disturbs, but also liberates. Which of the two versions do you choose to believe? Perhaps it's easier to think that dreaming is merely a theater of the unconscious. But what if it's much more? What if dreams are, in fact, transmissions coming from beyond matter? Tesla believed that to deny this possibility was to deny the very nature of reality. He knew the truth could be uncomfortable, but he also saw in it the key to the human future. Now reflect on the times you've woken up tired, as if you'd run a marathon overnight. What if you actually did? What if physical fatigue were merely evidence that the body had moved on another plane? What for many would be mere metaphor, for Tesla was literal. He believed that human beings were vibrational travelers, and that sleep was the vehicle. Each night takes us to places logic cannot yet reach, and each dream is proof that we've already been there. The difference is that few dare to believe. If the brain is an antenna, then every emotion we take to bed is the frequency we tune into. And herein arises a problem. How many nights have you fallen into disharmony, filled with fear, anger, or anxiety? How many times have you woken from nightmares that seem to echo these exact emotional states? Tesla claimed that the universe responds to vibrations. If you fall asleep in chaos, you dream in chaos. If you fall asleep in serenity, you encounter scenes of light. This means that sleep is not neutral. It reveals and amplifies what vibrated silently within us. And this presents us with an invisible choice. What frequency do you carry with you as you make it through the night? This is where micro-conflicts arise that everyone has experienced. You'd like to believe it's just accumulated fatigue, but what if it's much more? You'd like to think that dreaming about someone who's already died is just nostalgia, but what if it's a real encounter? You'd like to believe that waking up with a brilliant idea is the result of chance, but what if it's a transmission received in the silence of the night? Denying can be comfortable, accepting can be transformative, and it's at this point of tension that Tesla becomes even more present. He wasn't just an inventor of machines, he was an explorer of invisible frontiers. His experiments with electricity, energy, and vibration weren't just techniques, but living metaphors for what he believed about the mind and sleep. Just as a Tesla coil captures and distributes energy, the human brain, in his view, captures and translates universal waves. What if this metaphor is literal? What if sleep is exactly that, the invisible coil of consciousness in action? This reflection leads us to an inevitable provocation. What if we live half our lives blind, believing we're asleep, when in fact we're traversing entire worlds? Tesla saw sleep as the most fertile space in existence. For him, each night was an opportunity to connect with what wakefulness cannot bear. And yet, most of us prefer not to remember, not to investigate, not to dare. We prefer the illusion of forgetting. But is ignoring the same as being protected? Or simply remaining unaware of what's already happening? There's something unsettling about this perspective. If sleep is a portal, it opens whether you want it to or not. The only difference is whether you enter awake or blind. And this is the question Tesla would leave us with today. Will you continue to sleep as a victim of illusion? Or will you dare to cross over as a conscious traveler? Because deep down, every human being has sensed there was more. Everyone has woken up with a feeling impossible to explain. Everyone has dreamed something that seemed to transcend the limits of the mind. The difference is that some forget and others decide to investigate. Tesla decided to investigate. He transformed his nights into temples, his ideas into inventions, and his intuitions into science. He dared to hear what the universe whispers when all others are silent. Now the choice is yours. Tonight, when you close your eyes, will you surrender to the routine of oblivion? Or will you accept that you are about to cross an invisible threshold? Tesla believed that there is no neutrality. Every vibration calls forth a response. Every sleep is an experiment, and every dream is a transmission. The question is, are you willing to listen? What if I told you that what you'll call a dream tonight might be the first sign that your life was never just what happens when you're awake? Imagine for a moment that what you call your mind doesn't entirely belong to you. Imagine that your thoughts don't just originate within you, but reach you like invisible waves that travel through space. Nikola Tesla believed exactly this. For him, the human brain wasn't the absolute creator of consciousness, but rather a receiver, an instrument capable of capturing signals that already existed in the universe. This idea alone shakes the foundations of everything we've learned since childhood. If our dreams aren't inventions but transmissions, what really happens to us every time we close our eyes? This question seems simple, but it carries enormous emotional and philosophical weight, as it directly affects our perception of reality. How many times have you woken up with a phrase in your head, an unexpected idea, or the memory of a dream that seemed to contain a message? Was this just a coincidence? Or could it be something greater? Something Tesla saw as one of the greatest hidden truths of existence? He said his mind was like an antenna, tuned to capture specific vibrations, and that all his inventions first emerged in his imagination as clear, almost palpable visions. This leads us to a disturbing reflection. What if the human mind were less a producer of thoughts and more a translator of frequencies? This would explain why so many people around the world report similar experiences in dreams, encounters with deceased loved ones, visions of unknown places, or even predictions of future events. Traditional science dismisses these experiences as coincidences or the product of an overstimulated brain, but for Tesla, these experiences were clues that the universe functions as a constant transmission network. Now, imagine something very close to your everyday life. Have you ever thought of someone you hadn't seen in years, and shortly afterward, that person sent you a message or called you? This kind of synchronicity is often interpreted as coincidence, but if we look at it through Tesla's eyes, it could be a clear example of how our minds capture invisible signals. Just as a radio antenna can pick up music that's already on the air, perhaps our minds are constantly capturing information that doesn't come from within us. This idea opens up a powerful field for reflection. To what extent are we the authors of our thoughts? And to what extent are we the receivers of something greater? Tesla provoked this kind of intellectual discomfort. For him, ignoring these transmissions was like turning off a radio because you don't like the station. He believed that every human being could somehow tune into higher frequencies, but few had the discipline and courage to do so. In everyday life, this lack of awareness translates into mechanical lives, into people who don't realize that many of their fears, anxieties, or even intuitions don't arise from nowhere, but are captured by invisible fields that interact with us. Life becomes a reflection of the waves you tune into, and sleep in this process is the phase in which your internal antenna is most open, most vulnerable, and at the same time, most powerful. Think about the times you've dreamed about something seemingly meaningless, but which, throughout the next day, somehow connected with reality. Perhaps you dreamed about a conflict situation and, hours later, faced a similar argument. Or perhaps you dreamed of a creative solution to a seemingly insoluble problem. These fragments are small examples of how the mind works as a receiver of waves, adjusting itself to capture answers, visions, or even warnings. The question that arises is disturbing. How many times have you received signals but ignored them? How many opportunities have you missed because you decided to believe it was just your imagination? Tesla experienced this conflict intensely. He claimed to envision each invention in detail before even building it. The alternating current motor, for example, emerged not as a sketch, but as a complete vision, with gears working before his mind. He tested the mechanisms internally, adjusted them mentally, and only then brought them into the physical world. This process seemed impossible to his contemporaries, but to Tesla it was natural, because he understood that his mind was connected to a universal field of information. If this was true for his inventions, why wouldn't it be true for the dreams we all have at night? Perhaps each of us, to a lesser extent, is capturing fragments of this same field, but due to lack of training and confidence, we end up discarding what could transform our lives. The conflict intensifies when we remember how often we ignore our intuitions. Perhaps you felt an internal warning not to follow a certain path, and by persisting, you ended up facing a difficult situation. Or conversely, perhaps you followed an unexplained impulse and encountered something unexpected, like an opportunity or a decisive encounter. These experiences are part of everyone's daily life and, according to Tesla, are not accidents. They are evidence that our antennas are always working, capturing signals that transcend space and time. The problem is that we've become accustomed to ignoring them, conditioned by a culture that values only what can be measured and explained rationally. Now, bring this back to sleep. When you fall asleep, your mind loses the critical barriers that wakefulness erects. In this state, it opens to frequencies it wouldn't normally access. This explains why so many report intense dreams, impossible encounters, or even feelings of having already lived a moment before it happens. For Tesla, this was no coincidence. It was proof that, during sleep, we are tuned into invisible stations. Each dream is a translation, a symbolic narrative of signals coming from a larger field. Ignoring them is like turning off the radio because you don't understand the language being spoken. The challenge, therefore, is to learn to listen. But how can we hear what we cannot see? How can we believe in what seems so subtle? Tesla already anticipated this difficulty. He knew that humanity was not ready to fully accept these ideas, which is why he said that the future would reveal the truth of their thoughts. And this future may be happening now, as so many people around the world begin to report similar experiences, connecting dreams, intuitions, and synchronicities that escape traditional logic. The suspense intensifies when we realize that, if the brain is a receiver, then it can also be influenced. This raises a delicate question. What frequencies are we picking up without realizing it? How many of our nighttime worries or confused dreams are not just reflections of our own anxiety, but signals from chaotic fields all around us? And most importantly, can we choose which frequencies to feed on? Tesla believed so. For him, emotional control and mental discipline were ways of adjusting the dial of our internal antenna. Just as you choose the radio station you want to listen to, you can also choose the waves you want to capture. This possibility restores to us the power we so often forget we possess. Imagine, for example, someone who goes to sleep after a day full of financial worries. Their mind vibrates with scarcity, fear, and anxiety. As they fall asleep, their dreams are filled with chases, falls, or situations of loss. But imagine that same person, on another night, lying down after a moment of gratitude, remembering the good things that happened, however small. In this case, their dreams may bring open landscapes, comforting encounters, or even ideas for solving problems. This difference isn't magic, it's resonance. The brain, like an antenna, translates what it's in tune with. Tesla saw this as a law of nature. Everything responds to frequencies, and this is where your daily life connects directly. How many times have you gone to sleep filled with frustration and woken up even more tired? How many times have you carried arguments or fears into your pillow and woken with nightmares? And how many times, on the contrary, have you surrendered to the night in peace and woken refreshed, even with little sleep? These experiences reveal that, in practice, we've all experienced what Tesla knew in theory. The mind doesn't create on its own, it responds. And if you change the frequency, you change the response. The suspense now grows in another direction. If dreams are transmissions, who are the transmitters? Is it the universe itself, offering clues about life? Are they layers of the collective unconscious, where we are all connected? Or are they invisible intelligences, waiting for us to learn to listen? Tesla didn't answer with absolute certainty, but he said something that still unsettles us today. The day science begins to study non-physical phenomena, it will advance more in a decade than in previous centuries. The message is clear. To ignore these experiences is to delay our own evolution. When you close your eyes tonight, perhaps you'll remember these words. Perhaps you'll wonder if what you're about to dream isn't your invention, but a message. Perhaps you'll realize that the simple act of falling asleep is greater than you ever imagined. And perhaps in that moment, Tesla's provocation will resonate within you. If the mind is an antenna, why insist on leaving it turned off? What if the next transmission you capture is the very answer to the question that plagues you most today? Close your eyes for a moment and imagine the boundary between being awake and being asleep. This almost invisible moment, when thoughts begin to fade, but you still perceive voices around you or feel images emerging like quick flashes of lightning, has always seemed banal to most people. But for Nikola Tesla, this boundary was one of the most precious points in human existence. He believed it was at this moment that the mind connected with the purest source of inspiration. It was there, at this transition point, that inventions emerged complete, ideas formed in detail, and mysteries revealed themselves as if they were just waiting for human consciousness to relax its barriers. Now think, how many times have you experienced this moment without realizing it? How many times have meaningless images come to mind just before falling asleep, and you simply ignored them? What would have happened if you had paid attention? This question is disturbing because it confronts us with the possibility that we are wasting decisive moments every night. Tesla didn't waste them. He held a metal object in his hands, and when sleep overtook him, the object would fall to the floor, awakening him precisely at that transition point. He used this shock to capture the instant when the invisible became visible. This technique wasn't a trick, but a method for dialoguing with what lies beyond the physical. And here a necessary shift arises. Why do we avoid these liminal states? Why does society teach us that we are either awake or asleep, as if there were nothing in between? Perhaps because admitting that there is an intermediate zone, where the mind touches other frequencies, would be accepting that reality is more complex than we suppose. Have you ever stopped to consider that the moment we most reject, that brief torpor, may be precisely the moment we most need to explore? Tesla's experience opens the door to a deeper reflection. If ready-made ideas emerge at this threshold, are we simply inventing or accessing an already existing space? What he called visions could be described as memories of something not yet realized, as if the future were a territory already mapped out and available to those who learn to cross the border. This reasoning radically changes the way we understand time and creativity. Could it be that great inventions are not born within a brain, but rather harvested by it from a kind of universal field? See how this applies to your daily life. How many times have you woken up with a clear solution to a problem that plagued you the day before? How many times has a phrase, an idea, or a decision popped into your mind as soon as you opened your eyes? These moments can't be explained simply as the result of rest. They carry something more. The brain, in this state, is tuned to different brain waves, close to deep meditation. where rational criticism diminishes and access to the unconscious, or perhaps something greater than the unconscious, becomes possible. What do you do with this access? Ignore it or take advantage of it? And here the narrative needs a twist. What if everything you call creativity wasn't creation, but translation? Imagine the impact of this idea. If the brain translates and doesn't create, every work of art, every invention, every brilliant thought already existed somewhere before it reached you. What we call genius would actually be the ability to tune into this frequency more clearly. This would explain why so many artists, scientists, and inventors describe their works as something that simply appeared before them. It's no coincidence that so many speak of dreams, altered states, or sudden flashes of insight as the source of their greatest creations. But another inevitable question arises. If this access is available to everyone, why are only a few able to utilize it in extraordinary ways? The answer may lie in discipline. Tesla didn't rely on chance. He trained his mind to remain at this transition point. He created strange habits, walked alone at night, repeated thoughts until they became resonances, avoided distractions that would disturb his inner field. He prepared himself to hear what many never dare to hear. Would you be willing to employ this same level of discipline to access possibilities that today seem unattainable? Consider, too, how these states can reveal more than mere fabrications. How many times have you experienced dreams or perceptions that seem to carry warnings? Perhaps a sense of danger, perhaps an intuition that someone nearby needed help. These signs often appear precisely at this threshold between sleep and wakefulness. We ignore them because logic doesn't know how to fit them together. But what if they were genuine transmissions from something greater? As Tesla believed, how many lives could be changed if we took these perceptions seriously? Here we need to break the flow again. What if we've been looking in the wrong place all along? Science has spent decades trying to measure consciousness through brain scans, as if everything were inside the skull. But if the mind is an antenna, then the waves come from outside. The brain would merely be the translator of an invisible network that supports everything. What would happen if we accepted this hypothesis as true? What impact would it have on our view of life, death, and the future? Tesla understood that the threshold of sleep was a key to this network. He knew that, in these moments, the human mind is not bound by the constraints of linear reason. It's as if time expanded, and what we call past, present, and future blended into a single vibrational field. He sought this state as others seek temples, for he knew that answers lay within. And the provocation he leaves us with is stark. How many answers have been given to you in this state, and you simply didn't pay attention? Have you ever woken up with a feeling of déjà vu so intense it felt like you were reliving something? Have you ever caught yourself saying you knew that was going to happen? Perhaps this is the reflection of a memory captured on the threshold, erased by the rush of the day, but returned when reality finally confirms it. What if these moments aren't mental glitches, but evidence that we access different timelines? This possibility completely changes our notion of destiny and free will. But a paradox arises. If we grasp possible futures, to what extent are they inevitable? What if changing the mind's vibration at this threshold can also change the course of those futures? Tesla believed so. He saw frequency as the key to reality. By altering the frequency, we alter the outcome. This means that every moment before sleep, every image that emerges as we fall asleep, can be an opportunity to rewrite our path. The question is, do you have the courage to embrace this power? Or would you rather continue believing that everything is already determined? The mystery deepens when we consider experiences reported by ordinary people. Many describe seeing solutions to inventions, numbers and equations, or even musical scores appear out of nowhere in this state between wakefulness and sleep. Others speak of encounters with unknown figures, as if masters or guides appeared only to convey brief messages. Most ignore these accounts, but Tesla would see them as evidence that the mind touches something beyond. What if we are being taught every night but we forget because we don't know how to record them? And here, the pattern break is inevitable. Why do we accept living half our lives oblivious? If a third of our existence is dedicated to sleep, ignoring it as a tool is like spending years in a library without ever opening a book. Tesla didn't accept this. He turned the night into a school, and each fragment of vision into a lesson. The difference between him and most wasn't privilege, it was choice. He chose to pay attention. Do you choose? This reflection takes us to the heart of the conflict. It all seems too simple: sleep, dream, wake up. But in reality, we're talking about crossing vibrational boundaries that can reveal the origin of creativity, time, and even consciousness. The problem is that simplicity is deceiving. The moment of transition seems banal, and that's precisely why we ignore it. But what if this moment is the most precious we have? Wouldn't it be ironic that the greatest key to existence is hidden in what we despise daily? Tesla made it clear that he didn't believe in coincidences. For him, every signal had a pattern, every vibration had a cause, every vision had a meaning. Apparent chaos was merely order not yet understood. If we took this seriously, perhaps our dreams, our intuitions, and our moments of transition would no longer be dismissed as illusions. They would be treated as messages, as transmissions waiting for an attentive receiver. And here, the tension closes in to make way. What will you do when you fall asleep tonight? Will you ignore the fragments that emerge, or will you see them as possible codes? The decision seems small, but it isn't. Because if Tesla was right, every time you fall asleep, your mind's antenna is being adjusted. The question is whether you will be present to listen, or will you continue to let the frequency fade into silence? What if the next time you find yourself on that threshold is exactly the moment the universe is trying to deliver you the most important insight of your life? Imagine lying down after a busy day, believing that night will be just a gap between two moments of wakefulness. Now consider what would happen if this assumption were a gigantic error. Nikola Tesla believed that night was much more than rest. It was a vibrational opportunity. He said that everything in the universe is energy, and that energy never lies. This means that every emotion, every thought, every memory you carry with you when you fall asleep shapes not only the content of your dreams, but also the way your consciousness traverses the invisible layers of reality. If this seems too philosophical, look at your daily life. How many times have you gone to bed anxious and had confusing dreams, full of chases or falls? And how many times have you fallen asleep peacefully and woken refreshed, remembering clearer, even comforting scenarios? These differences are no coincidence. They are direct manifestations of the frequency at which your mind vibrates when you close your eyes. Stories of dreams that changed destinies are scattered throughout human history. Elias Howe, the inventor of the sewing machine, reported that the idea for the needle mechanism came to him in a dream in which warriors threatened him with spears tipped with holes. Paul McCartney said that the melody of Yesterday, one of the world's most famous songs, came to him during his sleep. And Albert Einstein claimed that many of his insights into space and time were born in reverie states or intense dreams. These stories seem special because we associate genius with unique gifts, but if we look at them from Tesla's perspective, they may not be exceptions, but clear signs of how we all have access to the same vibrational field. The difference is that some dared to believe what they saw while asleep. Now consider a curious statistic. Studies by the American Psychological Association show that about 60% of people report having had at least one premonitory dream throughout their lives. We're not talking about artists or brilliant inventors, but ordinary people who at some point dreamed of something that later became real. This number is too large to ignore. 6 in 10 individuals have had at least one such experience. And yet, society insists on classifying dreams as byproducts of a tired mind. Could this be one of the greatest negligences in human history? An even more impressive finding comes from research conducted by the Sleep Neuroscience Laboratory at Northwestern University. In 2014, they demonstrated that, during sleep, the brain not only processes memories from the past, but also reacts differently to patterns of information that point to future possibilities. In other words, even without realizing it, the sleeping mind is capable of anticipating events. If modern science is beginning to find evidence of this, imagine what Tesla, over a century ago, already intuited when he stated that sleep was an invisible relay station. Now imagine this scene: a man in the early 20th century, sitting alone in his laboratory lit by experimental lamps, walking late into the night to keep his mind awake at the point between wakefulness and sleep. He wasn't seeking rest, but harmony. Tesla trained his mind to capture waves, just as his machines captured invisible electrical currents. For him, emotional discipline was essential. He avoided distractions, cultivated solitude, and used the night as a vibrational laboratory. Ask yourself, how often have you used the night for more than just sleep? Stories of transformative dreams don't stop with inventors or artists. During World War II, Winston Churchill reported that certain strategic decisions came to him after turbulent nights, in symbolic dreams that seemed to translate the weight of war into dramatic images. Mark Twain recounted dreaming about his brother's funeral days before his tragic death, and even religious figures, like Joseph in the biblical account, interpreted dreams as messages that guided life or survival decisions. These accounts from different eras and contexts reinforce what Tesla already stated. Dreams are vibrational records, translations of what our minds perceive when we are not distracted by everyday logic. But a disturbing question arises. If sleep is such a powerful portal, why do most people remember almost nothing upon waking? This is one of the greatest tensions of this topic. Tesla believed that selective memory was not a flaw, but a safeguard. Forgetting in this case would be a necessary filter, preventing the mind from being overwhelmed by information that could destabilize your daily life. Imagine if every morning you woke up with clear memories of other realities, encounters with deceased people, or even alternate versions of yourself. Would you be able to live normally, go to work, handle commitments? Perhaps not. Forgetting protects, but it also limits. And those who dare to remember more must be prepared to endure the radical change in their perception of their own existence. An unexpected fact helps to understand this mechanism. In experiments conducted with groups that kept dream diaries, it was found that people who immediately recorded their memories upon waking significantly increased the amount of details they remembered as the days went by. This means that forgetting isn't absolute. It can be trained. Just as muscles grow with exercise, dream memory expands with practice. What changes isn't the occurrence of dreams, but the ability to access them. What if we were all experiencing powerful experiences every night, but we just hadn't trained ourselves to remember them? Tesla reportedly answered yes. He saw sleep as an underrated territory. He believed that most people entered it carrying vibrations of fear, anger, or anxiety, and therefore encountered nightmarish scenarios or confusion. But he also said that those who entered the night with gratitude, serenity, and clear intention opened doors to worlds of clarity and discovery. This view directly resonates with modern research on meditation. Studies published in the Journal of Sleep Research indicate that people who meditate regularly before bed report not only better sleep quality, but more vivid and organized dreams. The vibration with which you enter sleep determines what you find there. The contrast between two possible realities is inevitable. Imagine a person who ends the day anxious, worried about bills, family arguments, and fearful of the future. They fall asleep with confused thoughts, and during the night, their dreams place them in suffocating situations full of rushing and anguish. Upon waking, they feel even more tired. Now imagine another person who, before sleeping, takes a deep breath, gives thanks for something simple, like a gesture of kindness or a small achievement, and sets an intention: I want to wake up in peace. Their dreams then are more open, filled with inspiring symbols, perhaps even comforting encounters. They wake up refreshed, even if their sleep time was the same. This contrast isn't mystical, it's vibrational. What if we're all repeating night after night a pattern that sabotages our own minds? How many times have you fallen asleep amid screens, violent news, or arguments? How many of those nights resulted in nightmares or insomnia? What would happen if you transformed your last waking minutes into a ritual of clarity, as Tesla did, preparing yourself to hear what the universe had to say? This simple habit change could redefine not only your dreams, but your waking life. Tesla claimed that inventions didn't originate from him, but were transmitted. He said he saw complete machines before his mind and simply constructed them in the physical world. This statement seems unbelievable, but it gains weight when we remember that many inventors, musicians, and scientists report similar experiences. It's as if creativity weren't the property of an individual, but the result of an alignment. If this is true, it means that every person who sleeps has access to the same possibilities, but not everyone knows how to decode them. Sleep, then, is not just rest, it's a channel. And here arises an inevitable provocation. How many times have you ignored messages that could change your life? How many times have you dismissed a dream as nothing major, only to realize days later that it reflected a real situation? How many times have you had a clear intuition but decided to silence it because it seemed irrational? Tesla wouldn't have made that mistake. He knew that the mind, when opened at night, is more permeable, more sensitive, closer to what we can't see during the day. The weight of this understanding is immense. If the night is a vibrational laboratory, then we waste a third of our lives believing it is merely rest. Imagine how many inventions were never born, how many solutions were never received, how many warnings were ignored because we chose to believe it was all an illusion. Tesla called this willful blindness. It's not that there are no signs, it's that we choose not to see them. And what would happen if you decided to see? If today, before going to sleep, you told yourself that you want to remember, that you want to learn, that you want to listen, maybe at first nothing will happen. Maybe you'll get frustrated thinking it's all just empty wishful thinking, but over time, small signs will emerge. Clearer dream, a coincidence the next day, an intuition that proves true. And then, like Tesla, you might realize you weren't creating anything, just capturing what was always there. What if each night were actually an invitation? What if every time you closed your eyes, the universe was ready to transmit not just images, but directions? Would you continue to treat sleep as an unimportant pause? Or would you begin to experience it as the greatest laboratory of your own life? Imagine for a moment that time isn't a straight line, but a frequency that bends, stretches, and curves, depending on how you perceive it. Nikola Tesla always suspected the rigidity with which humanity views time. For him, past, present, and future weren't separated like compartments, but coexisted in different vibrational layers. When we dream, we touch these layers in a way that wakefulness rarely allows. How many times have you experienced a dream so vivid that upon waking, it felt like you'd passed through tomorrow before it arrived? How many times have you felt like you knew an event before you even witnessed it? These moments are tiny cracks in the wall of linear perception we've been conditioned to accept. The intriguing thing is that these cracks aren't rare, just ignored. If we stop to look at history, we'll see that dreams and premonitions have always had a place among ordinary people and historical figures. Abraham Lincoln, days before being assassinated, dreamed of his own funeral. Mark Twain described in detail his brother's burial before the tragedy occurred, and thousands of anonymous accounts, recorded in personal diaries or academic studies, tell of dreams that anticipated accidents, unexpected encounters, or life changes. Science, out of discomfort, calls this coincidence, but Tesla believed that nothing is coincidence. For him, what we call chance is merely a law not yet understood. If we follow this logic, each of these premonitory dreams is not an accident, but evidence that in the state of sleep, consciousness surpasses the clock and chronology that govern the physical world. Recent research reinforces this point. Scientists at Northwestern University have demonstrated that the sleeping brain is capable of capturing patterns and anticipating information in ways that the waking mind cannot. During sleep, brain regions linked to intuition and symbolic processing become more active, while the rational part that requires rigid logic relaxes. This creates a fertile ground for the unconscious, or perhaps something beyond it, to pick up vibrations that point to future developments. This possibility transforms the view of what is real. It means that dreams not only record past memories, but may contain maps of what is yet to come. And here an inevitable conflict arises. If the future can be seen, is it fixed, or can it be altered? Tesla didn't see the future as an immutable destiny. For him, reality is made of frequencies, and every choice we make changes the frequency we're tuned to. Thus, a dream depicting a tragedy can be a warning, not a condemnation. Changing one's vibrational state can change the timeline. This idea may seem absurd to those who believe only in the rigidity of matter, but it makes sense when we remember that quantum physics itself points to the coexistence of multiple possibilities up until the moment of observation. If particles can exist in more than one state, why couldn't the human future also branch out into more than one path? And here comes an example that connects this theory to everyday life. Imagine a person who repeatedly dreams of a car accident on a specific road. Frightened, they decide to avoid that route for a few weeks. Years later, they discover that a fatal accident occurred at that exact time. Was it a coincidence or a frequency shift? What if the dream wasn't an absolute prediction, but a warning that gave them the opportunity to alter their vibrational trajectory? This narrative shows that it's not just a mystical fascination, but a practical survival story. Dreams can save lives. Statistics reinforce the magnitude of this phenomenon. It is estimated that around 15% of the world's population reports having had at least one dream experience so intense that it changed their life or their vision of the future. If we multiply this percentage by the planet's population, we are talking about more than 1 billion people who have experienced something that defies linear logic. Such a large number cannot be ignored. It points to an underlying reality that traditional science has not yet dared to explore in depth. Tesla, however, already sensed this in his nights of wakefulness and experimentation. Now reflect, how many times have you dismissed an important dream because it seemed too absurd? How many times have you ignored a nocturnal intuition because you believed it was merely a reflection of daily worries? Perhaps you failed to realize that these messages don't just appear to entertain, but to guide. Discomfort arises precisely because we accept a limited version of time. We see the past as memory, the present as experience, and the future as illusion. But what if they all coexist in the same vibrational field, and sleep is the vehicle that allows this journey? Tesla saw sleep as this bridge. He believed that in a resting state, the brain functioned as an antenna tuned to capture not only memories but also possibilities. He himself reported that many of his inventions appeared ready-made, as if they already existed on another plane, just waiting for his attention. For him, visualizing a complete machine before building it was more than creativity. It was direct access to a layer of reality where the future was already designed. This ability, according to him, was not a gift, but the result of discipline and training. The question this raises is uncomfortable. If we have access to multiple futures during sleep, to what extent are we prisoners of circumstances or authors of our own story? This reflection changes everything. It suggests that each night is an opportunity to choose. If you fall asleep fearful, you vibrate at the frequency of fear and connect to futures where that fear is confirmed. If you fall asleep peacefully, you open doors to lighter futures. In this sense, sleep not only reveals but shapes. A curious case helps illustrate this. In 1960, a woman named J.W. began recording her dreams in a diary. Soon she noticed that many of them came true with disturbing accuracy. She even predicted political events, accidents, and even climate change in her region. Her records were so consistent that they caught the attention of researchers. When analyzed, her diary showed that more than 30% of her dreams were directly related to verifiable future events. If a single person, with discipline, can achieve this level of accuracy, what would happen if millions did the same? Tesla would probably respond that the result would be a revolution in the way we view life. He believed that humanity could advance centuries in just a decade if it had the courage to study invisible phenomena, and perhaps he was right. If we learn to use sleep not just as rest, but as a tool for vibrational exploration, perhaps we could anticipate crises, avoid catastrophes, and even create more harmonious societies. What prevents this is the fear of abandoning the comfortable logic that reduces dreams to an illusion. Now ask yourself, how many times have you dreamed something and because you didn't believe it, neglected to write it down or reflect on its meaning? What if each fragment were a piece of a larger map, showing possible paths? What would change if you started taking these signs seriously? Perhaps like Tesla, you'd discover that reality is malleable and that the future is an open space awaiting your frequency. This thought may seem overwhelming, but it's also liberating. It removes us from the role of victims of time and places us in the role of co-creators. Each night is a silent laboratory where the universe offers us the chance to experience different futures. The question is, do you embrace this opportunity, or would you rather remain asleep in the belief that everything is already decided? Imagine that tonight you decide to formulate a clear question before going to sleep. When you wake up, you might not receive a literal answer, but a sensation, a symbol, or a powerful image. Throughout the day, notice if anything resonates with this message. Perhaps you'll meet an unexpected person. Perhaps you'll receive an invitation. Perhaps you'll have a sudden intuition. These moments are echoes of the vibrational field you accessed during sleep. They don't arise by chance. They are reverberations. And if you start paying attention, you'll realize that the thread between dream and reality is more tenuous than you ever believed. Tesla invites us to look at this thread with courage. He reminds us that energy doesn't lie, and that time is a construct that can be traversed. If we accept this invitation, perhaps we can transform each night into an opportunity for conscious creation. Sleep, in this sense, ceases to be an escape and becomes a tool. The future ceases to be a mystery and becomes a field of possibilities, and we cease to be spectators and become travelers between times. The question that remains is inevitable. When you close your eyes today, will you just rest, or will you dare to cross the invisible layers of time as Tesla did? Closing your eyes at night is such a common act that we rarely consider its profound significance. However, if you've made it this far, you've already realized that for Tesla and all who dare to cross the boundaries of perception, this simple gesture can be the gateway to a new life. Night doesn't have to be just oblivion. It can be a fertile ground for revelations, a station where your mind captures invisible frequencies, a daily opportunity to align your destiny. And the big question that hangs in the air is, what will you do with this knowledge? Will you allow it to dissolve like so much other information you've heard, or will you decide to transform your routine into a vibrational laboratory? The difference between theory and practice lies in a detail Tesla knew all too well: discipline. The first step to applying this understanding to your life is to prepare the groundwork. Tesla believed that nothing profound could emerge amid noise. Before bed, turn off distractions. Step away from screens that saturate your eyes with stimuli and give your body a chance to quiet down. Think of this moment as tuning an instrument. Just as an out-of-tune violin can't produce music, your tension-laden mind won't be able to capture clear signals during sleep. Create a nightly ritual. It can be simple: breathing deeply, writing a sentence on a piece of paper, or simply being grateful for something small that happened during your day. What matters isn't the size of the gesture, but the vibrational intention you place on it. The second step is to formulate clear intentions. Tesla said that our thoughts are transmissions, waves released into the invisible field, awaiting a response. Instead of falling asleep with scattered worries, formulate a direct question. It could be about a work problem, a personal dilemma, or even the meaning of your life. Ask yourself, what do I want to learn tonight? This phrase will become a kind of code, a vibrational command that will direct your consciousness to pick up specific signals. Don't expect a detailed movie upon waking. Sometimes the answer comes as a sensation, a synchronicity the next day, an enigmatic symbol. The key is learning to notice and trust. The third step is to record. The human mind easily forgets, but when you write, you create a bridge between the invisible and the physical. Keep a notebook dedicated to your dreams by your bed. When you wake up, write down everything you remember, even disconnected fragments. Over time, you'll notice patterns, recurring symbols, coded messages. These records aren't just memories, they're maps. And the more you respect them, the more your unconscious, or as Tesla would say, your antenna, will open to transmit clearly. The fourth step is to practice what Tesla called creative repetition. He himself reported visualizing his inventions in detail, mentally repeating each part until the project was complete before it was even built. You can use the same principle when preparing for sleep. Repeat your intention. Visualize a state of serenity. Imagine yourself entering a luminous space or receiving an answer. It's not about controlling what you dream, but about training your mind to tune into higher frequencies. Over time, this repetition creates a vibrational habit. The fifth step is to protect your energy. Tesla believed that the entire universe is made of frequencies, and that denser vibrations can disrupt the flow of more subtle ones. Therefore, before falling asleep, imagine yourself enveloped in a sphere of light. Visualize this light expanding around you, creating a protective field. This may seem overly simple, but symbols have power over the mind. When you internalize this image, you create a psychological and energetic barrier that reduces the influence of fears or anxieties that could disrupt your nighttime experience. The sixth step is to practice what we'll call grounding upon awakening. Many people report feeling tired even after nights filled with intense dreams. This happens because the mind remains connected to subtle layers and takes time to return to the physical body. Upon waking, drink a glass of water, walk barefoot for a few minutes, and feel your body's connection with concrete reality. Tesla understood the importance of grounding even in his electrical inventions. Without a connection to the earth, energy doesn't circulate harmoniously. The same applies to your consciousness. The seventh step is to trust the process. Perhaps nothing extraordinary happens in the first few days, You may not remember your dreams. You may feel like everything is in vain. But remember, even Tesla took years of discipline to perfect his practice. The mind needs time to adjust. Persistence is essential. Each night is a new opportunity, and the sum of these practices creates an increasingly sensitive vibrational field. Now think about the impact of applying these steps to your daily life. Imagine facing a professional dilemma and, instead of spending sleepless nights, preparing your mind before bed to seek an answer. Imagine going through a period of anxiety, but transforming your nights into rituals of serenity, waking up clearer and more refreshed. Imagine realizing that dreams are not just chaotic reflections, but symbolic guides that show you hidden directions. This process is not a luxury, it is practical power, and if you cultivate it, you will notice real changes in your waking life. Stories of transformation are not uncommon. Ordinary people who began recording their dreams report not only greater clarity about themselves, but also firmer decisions and more accurate intuitions. Some discovered hidden talents, others realized emotional patterns that needed healing. The bottom line is that sleep ceases to be a waste and becomes a tool for self-knowledge and creation. Tesla saw this as one of humanity's greatest neglected secrets. He believed that if everyone learned to use sleep this way, we would make unimaginable leaps in our evolution. And now, after all this journey, the question is inevitable. What will you do tonight? Will you lie down as usual, believing that sleep is merely rest? Or will you experience for the first time, entering the night as one enters a temple, carrying with you a clear intention, a protected heart, and the courage to receive signs that can change your path? This is the invitation. This is the provocation. If you feel fear, remember, it's natural. Every major transformation awakens resistance. But also remember that Tesla never followed the path of the majority. He dared to believe in the invisible. He dared to explore territories no one else wanted to touch. Following his example doesn't mean copying his steps, but assuming the same courage to look beyond the surface. The future isn't a fixed destination waiting for you. The future is a frequency you can choose every night, with every thought, with every intention. When you close your eyes today, think about this. Are you just resting, or are you tuning into the universe? This is the difference between a repetitive life and a conscious life. If this message touched you, if it somehow resonated with you, or sparked your curiosity, I invite you to take the next step with me. Subscribe to this channel to continue this journey, like this video to reinforce this message, and share your questions, reflections, or personal experiences in the comments. If you prefer, do so anonymously. Your story can inspire others, just as Tesla's dreams inspired generations. Don't let this knowledge slip away. Turn it into action. Tonight, you can choose to be just someone who sleeps, or you can be a conscious traveler in a vibrational universe. The decision is in your hands, and with each choice, each night you create tomorrow.